Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast 890. Is that even possible? I think it is. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know what we're going to do. There was the Canadian Grand Prix, and you know how we do this.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do on race reviews, of course. But before I review a race, I have to find an actual race car driver, an actual person who works in the world of motorsport, the sporting manager of the Aston Martin hard racing team. You know him. You love him.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad. He's beautiful. He's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
It is Paul Wastegate Charsley.
Wastegate, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
A little turbo talk there, huh?
Yeah. Sounds good. Walking down the street.
Yeah, Paul Wastegate Charsley.
Think it's something else, but yeah.
They probably would.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Paul, I happen to know, for all of our listeners out there, that you are mere hours away from boarding a plane and heading to the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Yes.
What
exciting is that, huh?
The GT3 Vantage.
Yep. Looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were second in the pre-test, if you want to call it that, yesterday. Yep. So the car was handling good. Drivers seemed pretty happy with it. So, yeah, let's go.
It's good.
Yeah. Not the only thing we've got going on there. It's a busy week for me, actually.
Yeah.
Because we've got Gray is actually... who drives in the SRO series, GT4. He's racing our GT3 Mercedes in a support race called the Road to Le Mans, which is 2 one-hour races.
Oh, cool.
So that's awesome. It's kind of like a learning series to actually go move up to Le Mans hopefully one day. So that's cool. And then we got the 2 Hannahs who are going to race in something called the Volkswagen Cup, which is basically Volkswagen-bodied 200 horsepower race cars, and it's a 4-hour race, so they're going to team up as they do, and they're going to be racing on Friday morning. So they're all in different paddocks, so I'm going to be like, I'm going to put my pedometer on and probably have some blisters by the end of the weekend, but it's all good stuff. Yeah.
So you got Gray racing, you got Hannah Squared racing.
Yeah.
And then who's your driver lineup for the big dance?
So the same WEC lineup as always, which is Daniel Mancinelli. We've got Alex Ramirez, and then, of course, the young Ian James.
The youthful, the spriteful Ian James.
Yes. Yeah, he's done a lot of work over the winter, like a lot of fitness work and everything. He's like full guns for this year for that team. And doing pretty good in the series, and the car's looking fairly competitive for Le Mans, so we're excited, yeah.
Yeah, so he's all svelte, he's lost, 2 stone. I don't know how
like
you guys.
That. He's done a good job. It's tough.
Yeah.
He'll be as soon as the season's ending, I'm sure he's going to be pizza and donuts, But yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's exciting. Well, the 24-hour Le Mans is just awesome, and and super excited about it this year with you guys in the race, and it's going to be super cool. So
yeah,
that is awesome. So watch this space, Heart of Racing. That's your GT team to cheer for there.
Absolutely,
for the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
Yeah,
for sure. So Paul, the Canadian Grand Prix, you got that watch this weekend. You and I were watching in real time, texting back and forth. All of our quips and observations during the race. Let's talk about this race a little bit, and then we'll jump in to review the teams as they finish. So it's an old school track, Paul, and it's produced a lot of great races. You've been there. You know that track. You like that
I've been
track.
there. I know them. Yeah.
You've been there. You've been there. You've been with
got pictures. Yeah.
Nod, nod, wink, wink. And you like that track. And, it's... it can always offer up some great races, and has super hard on brakes, and a really fun race to watch typically, and it's always incredibly well supported by all of the Canadian fans who love the race, and no less this year with 350,000 in aggregate over the weekend. So a great race. But which parts of this track are particularly challenging?
Obviously, as you say, the braking zones. You gotta execute those chicanes to perfection. Although those chicanes, they look simple, but if you get a little bit wrong, it goes all the way wrong, as we saw in the race and in the practice. So it's really being super, super precise to take those curves exactly perfectly and not unsettle the car. So I mean, it's high-speed circuit, so there's low downforce also. So you're still trying to get these cars. They're used to downforce where it'd be really useful in some of these corners, but they don't have it because it's detriment to the actual lap time. So they're dealing with a lower grip level from the aero while still having to execute those things. So and the walls, of course, very unforgiving. And so it's a great race. It's generated a lot of good races, as you said. It's a great event to go to if you're. I know we've got Miami and Vegas and all this kind of stuff, but if you want to know what a Formula One race feels like in Europe, go to Montreal. And it's a great fan experience because it's easy to get to the track and out of the track and everything like that. So I'd highly recommend going there for sure.
Yeah, it's produced some great races. It had some tragedies too, and I did want to give a shout out. I get to thinking about this over the weekend for whatever reason. It just popped in my head. And we don't ever talk about it on the podcast, or I don't see many news articles since 2013 when it happened. But a shout out to the friends and family and friends of Mark Robinson, who was a marshal there, who tragically was killed in 2013 after the race, in incredibly tragic circumstances, and you feel for that, Paul. And the marshals, it's a thankless job, and they're sacrificing their time and efforts and trying to help, and then when you see one get injured or worse, in the case of Mark Robinson, it's just brutal. So anyway, shout out to the family and friends of there. It was just weighing on my mind this weekend for whatever reason, and I just wanted to mention that Mark's not forgotten. I still thought about him this weekend, and appreciate all the marshals do.
Yeah, they're an amazing bunch. Amazing.
Yeah,
bunch.
they really are. Yeah. I know there was several issues this year from the track perspective. The muddy parking lots, not enough parking, fans being turned away on Friday and Saturday. Friday, I believe it was, the police, there was a miscommunication. They were telling fans that FP1 and 2 are canceled, and they weren't, and it created a lot of...
I didn't even hear that,
Yeah, apparently it created a lot of issues, and there was some water coming into the hospitality areas for the teams, and I think there was... got a bit of a bloody nose this weekend, and it's uncharacteristic of this race, if I'm honest. And so Stefano Domenicali was apologizing to the teams and those kind of things for the things that went wrong. This race is secured for a long time, but I think F1 will be putting some pressure on the race promoters to up their game in some of these infrastructure and facility situations that they ran into.
Right. Obviously, you're caught out by the rain a little bit, but there's no excuse for that. And as F1 has grown, I think some circuits aren't ready for it to some degree. The amount of people that they have to start moving around and keeping safe and getting them to where they need to go.
Yeah, I think you're right. They had 350,000 people there this weekend over the entirety of the weekend, and it's a lot of people. And then you add inclement weather and the challenges, and everything's wet, and it makes things more difficult.
Yeah, I remember where I was there when Alesi won his only Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what year it was. And we were sitting, me and my friend John Rutherford, we were literally sat there for hours at turn 1 because we didn't, too cheap to buy seats, like up against the fence with just rain, just anything we could put on top of us, just sat there. But luckily it was worth it because it was a pretty... historic race, actually, and certainly for Alesi to finally win a Grand Prix, that was cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Very cool. The race was a wet, dry race. Started in the wet, dried out, then it got wet again, then it dried out, and they had a tremendous amount of strategy, right? This is a real migraine for the strategy makers in each of the teams. It certainly spices up the race. It's very difficult for the drivers, very difficult for the strategy team, very difficult for the mechanics with the pit stops. It adds a layer of complexity and really does spice up a race when you get a lot of this going on. You know,
well, they had the day off at Monaco, right?
They did, yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
They were sipping their martinis after half the race.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we got. Yeah, just stay out there.
Yeah, they were half asleep in the garage in Monaco. An amazing tie for pole position too, with George and Max on 112 dead for pole. That's only happened one other time in 1997 with Jacques Villeneuve, Schumacher, and Heinz held Frentzen back in '97. So, rarefied air to tie. I know they F1 race control measures it beyond
right, but they can't officially use that.
But they can't officially use it. But they actually know who was the fastest. But nobody's saying, because they only use up to a certain measurement. But anyway, let's jump into the race. We'll talk about the teams as they finished. We'll go through them. We'll start off the top of the sharp end with Red Bull. Obviously, Max Verstappen taking the win in P1. Sergio Perez at DNF. We'll start with Max. Max ran second for the first part of the race, 20 laps or so, Paul. Chasing George for the lead. Lost the spot to Lando Norris at that point. He recovered, was able to get George, and then to get back to P2, to get George to get back in P2. Then he benefited from the safety car in a similar way that he got screwed by the safety car in Miami. It benefited him here, and where Lando got collected by the safety car, Max did not, was able to box. That made it work out well for Max. When Max boxed again, Lando stayed out. And as you and I were texting back and forth, maybe a lap too long for Lando, and that allowed Max to stay out, get the lead on fresh tires, get a heat cycle in those tires. Those tires were hot, and as Lando came out, he was crabbing across the pit exit, on cold tires on a wet spot of the track, and just couldn't hold it. Max got around him at that point, put his boot in it, and took off and took the win. So interesting race in that sense. You could say, well, it was Max's 60th win, it wasn't pole, but he just sailed off in the this wasn't smooth sailing.
No,
he won by just over 3 seconds, folks, and he had to work for every single inch of that. And I would argue, ever since Imola, these upgrades, the upgrades that they brought, the floor and the wings and stuff, that Red Bull, they've really struggled, and specifically with this whole stiffly sprung suspension and curbing and their performance over curbs, they're really struggling. I think what we saw, I don't want to overstate this and make this more than what it was, but I do think what we saw, and interested in your opinion on this, was, the mark of any of the champions, be it, Lewis, Fernando, Vettel, all the past, is that in this case, Max literally adapted, overcame, and drove around the issues that car was having to muscle out a win here. And I don't want to overstate that, but I don't want to ignore it either.
Yeah, I mean, it's intensity, right? Like we were talking about when you're talking about the track and getting through the chicanes and being precise. I mean, he literally had to be on he made a mistake. He went off at one point.
Yeah.
But to try and drive around and not be able to take those curves, which are kind of a cheap fix for some things. In the rain, he was probably helped by the fact that curbs can be actually a little perilous.
Dangerous, yep.
Yeah, and so I think that helped him a little bit. But
and the reason being, Paul, for if you're new to F1, there's curbs during the rain. The pockets of the curbs can hold a lot of water.
And they're painted as well, and painted surfaces are very bad. Yeah, so if you're going across a surface like that, you have to be dead straight. Else any kind of angle, and
you can't have any lock in that steering.
No, it's going to start moving the car around. So as I said, he benefited from that, but that can't take away the fact that he, as you said, he had to focus 100% that whole race to be able to pull out the win, which is what we want to see. That car obviously has a compromise in it that they need to solve. As Max keeps relating to, it's like, we know what it is. But they're maybe not willing to give up everything to fix that problem, because there's a lot of other benefits with their approach to the car that may come to forth a lot of other tracks where, when they design a car, they try to get them, obviously the majority of the tracks to favor the car. Some teams with lower budgets focus on 3 tracks that, they can get their cars working at. So I think they're not panicking because I think they see the future a little brighter when they get through some of these circuits that are demanding a lot more curb riding than they want to take.
Yeah, I think Mercedes said it was kind of interesting that Red Bull, they came with an upgrade, which was actually a downgrade for them.
Yeah.
Which left Christian Horner saying, well, that's okay. We still beat you with a downgrade.
Yeah. But so, it shows that, the wars, that Red Bull aren't infallible.
That's right.
And as I said,
that's right.
Just if it's an upgrade that didn't work on this track doesn't mean it's not actually a benefit at some other track. So
yeah, we may find out at Barcelona, right? A completely different circuit and some completely different corners on offer there for sure. For Sergio, other side of the garage, what a tough weekend. He has a new contract. So his race could be Sunday. He has a new contract. He had contact with Gasly at the start and a crash into the wall, and that ended his race. That was his weekend.
And he qualified like a turd.
Yeah, out in Q1.
Yeah.
Sergio says he's lost a lot of momentum lately, but he'll work hard to regain it. We could spend a half an hour talking about the re-signing of Sergio, and I think if you go back in aggregate over the last 3 years, Sergio's been 6-7 tenths off the pace of Max. Now 2 years ago, even a year ago, may not have been that big of a deal. Such was Red Bull's dominance, but this year Red Bull didn't have that dominance, so 6-7 tenths is massive, and that means you're not going to finish behind Max in second place. You're going to finish down 6th or 7th.
Yeah.
Such as the tightness of the field with the resurgence of McLaren, Ferrari, and now, possibly Mercedes. So very difficult weekend for him. And then, Paul, he was given a 3-place grid penalty for the next race and a fine for the team. The team asked if he could drive the car back after he crashed and damaged his rear wing, asked if he could bring the car back to the pits. He did so. They wanted to avoid the safety car. Max was leading the race at that time. And he did, and he brought it back, but they said, there were some parts falling off. It was dangerous. You put other people at risk. And so he gave him a penalty for not parking up the car. Will Buxton had an interesting take on that. He said, you could reverse that scenario where they were asking him to bring the car in to avoid a safety car, and you could reverse that and say the team asking him to do something to bring out a safety car, and then you have Singapore. And I was like, well,
yeah, that's
okay.
Talking about extreme conclusion, right?
Yeah,
even close to the same thing.
No, I don't know that I'm going to connect those dots. I got to think, Paul, you're in this business. You're the sporting manager for a race. If your car has a crack up, if you can get the car back to the pits, that's what you want. Of course, they didn't want the safety car, but they want the car back at the pits.
They could fix it. There could be a red flag all of a sudden, and they have a chance to fix it and get back in the race. They don't know the extent of the damage. Could be 2 bolts and throw the new rear wing on. They don't know, so they never give up, right? So you'd always want the car to come back, unless you literally see that it's going to do a lot more damage to your own car. And it's not just every team does it. Whether it's the Williams with the loose wheel or this or that and everything. So every team tries to do it, as you say. It was funny though at IMSA, at Daytona, actually. I think it was this year and last year. There was a car that went off, and it literally was dispelling the whole car was disintegrating before our eyes. and then we're hearing Bo Barfield, who's the chief guy up there in race control, is going, there's a lot of orange overlaps. Please pull it off, and we'll get you right back to the paddock so you can fix your car. And this car is just driving at 5 miles an hour and just
disintegrating.
The extremes from Formula One to endurance racing. This guy's look like Alonso with 2 wheels.
Yeah. Well, it's like I can remember Le Mans. Cars that are off. There's drivers out trying to restart the car, trying to fix the car. Just anything to limp it back to the pits. That's a different series.
We just want to keep going. Yeah.
But it's the same for Formula One. They'd rather not have that car craned up and pictures of the underside. They'd rather just quietly get that car back to the pits if you can. And like you said, no, they don't want the safety car out. Max is leading. And I think the implication was, well, if they brought out the safety car, Max would have lost. Well, I don't know that either. either, and no one does. Max safely negotiated 2 safety car restarts as it was, and was in control. So I don't know that that's a foregone conclusion either. But if you can avoid a safety car when you've got a 4-second lead, you'd like to, you know. Yep. And so I understand it. I you know, I get the penalty, but anyway. But kudos to the team, Paul. Also, difficult strategy calls here. Lots unfolding during that race, you know, as the track started out initially wet, started drying. Do we hang out there? We know rain is coming in 9 minutes. Do we hang out there on those inners? Those inners are getting hot. They're getting chewed up. And even if you did hang out there, when the race did come, or the rain did come back, would you even have enough inters left to even be effective, right?
Yeah.
So kudos to Red Bull's strategy and team for making all the calls exactly, you know, perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to get them wrong, but yeah, they're working overtime for sure. Those supercomputers were on fire, you know, trying to think of all the scenarios, and they seem to trust the weather calls pretty well for this race.
Yeah.
So
they
know,
did.
Everyone was, and it was correct. They were like, "It's coming in 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
And
there comes the rain." Right. So it's pretty predictable. So that helped everyone kind of guide them a little bit closer to what would be ideal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you and I, you know, being here in the Midwest in America, you know, those storms up there, I mean, they was very splotchy, right?
Yeah.
You have sun coming through, and then you see a dark cloud, and a sun coming through and dark cloud. So the level of accuracy on the timing, I was really impressed with the weather forecast.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And as for Perez, I don't know. I don't see him lasting 2 years. I just don't.
I'd be surprised.
His contract or not. There's too many other good drivers there that they should give a shot for, because as you say, that the grid is closer, and if Perez is half a second off, he's behind all of them. So they can't afford it. They need to start moving on now. You know, we've got the Ricardos, you've got Liam Lawson's even, which would be pretty much rolling the dice. I'm sure Liam Lawson would do a good job in the end. Whether that's too soon, and we know Red Bull have moved people up too soon also. It's a lot of pressure being on that team. So
it is. I don't know. Can I be a little controversial and suggest that Sergio may not be the greatest at wet weather driving? That may not be his forte. I think he struggles in the wet. Where I think conversely, a guy like Lance Stroll actually does do pretty well in the wet.
Right, he does do pretty well.
He does do pretty
conditions,
well.
Actually,
yeah, he does. So, it's not everybody's forte, right, Paul?
Right.
I'm sure you've known drivers in your past that are fantastic in the wet, and other drivers just never can get on top.
Absolutely,
of the wet.
yeah. Level of comfort, how the car behaves. You know, in the rain, you nearly have to take risks every corner that you don't feel like you're taking when you're in the dry. But
I would imagine, because it's like, even, you know, when we're on road cars, but your confidence level, whole different thing in the wet, you know, that you know, you're going to the turn and you've got confidence that car's going to stick. In the wet, you don't have that confidence.
Yeah. It's tough because there's not that build up of adhesion. Yeah. That's the hardest thing, like braking points and get that initial turn in. Like when you've got adhesion, you can, even if the car's about to slip or about to lock up or about to understeer, you can feel it before it happens. But in the rain, you're a little more disconnected with the surface, so it's a little harder to judge it. So that's why some people aren't comfortable with not having that feeling, so they don't get to that edge, so to speak, or leap over the edge.
Yeah, you're right. It's that one moment that you can start to feel that adhesion leave, you know?
Right.
Or it's just starting to, and you can back off a little bit. In the rain, it just, boom, it's gone.
Yeah.
And there's no notice, there's no feeling for that. It's just all of a sudden you're spun.
Right.
Or you're hydroplaning or whatever it might be. Scary stuff. McLaren, Lando Norris P2, Oscar Piastri P5. Interesting race for Lando. I looked at it and I didn't want to overthink it, but to me, Lando clearly had pace on the inters early on.
Yeah.
I mean, he was passing everybody. He had the fastest car on the track on inters. Passed Max, passed George.
When it got a little drier.
When it got a little bit drier, yes.
Yeah.
It's that in between, right? But as it started to fully dry out, then that pace didn't seem quite there. He built that nice lead, though. What was it, 8-10 second lead, whatever it was, and then the safety car came out. He got collected up by the safety car. He was far ahead, missed the pit stop opportunity. He said it wasn't really the luck of the safety car or not. We could have pit, and we didn't. And he said it was our fault, and it cost us the race. He says we could have won that. So that happened. He had built up that lead. The safety car cost him 10 seconds. Sort of the reverse, as I mentioned, that happened in Miami that gave him the win. Now it cost him the win, right, in his mind. On inters, he ran longer than Max and George and put in some terrific laps. I mean, he was driving his heart out to try to gain a 22 second lead. But one, you and I were texting back and forth. We felt like, and you texted right when I was thumbing out the same thing. You said lap too long. And I was like, oh, I think it is a lap too long. You're exactly right.
That's where the overlap was on that lap. Yeah.
Yeah, because at that lap was 21 seconds, almost 22. And then that last lap is back down to 20. Max had put the coals to it.
Yeah, and if you got that extra 2 seconds out, he wouldn't have been, maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't, but he would have been in the first chicane rather than coming out of pit exit when Max got to him, right? So you never know what could happen at that point. Yeah, it's interesting when they call the safety car. Yeah, a lot of series I've dealt with will try to delay or hurry up a decision to not affect a race in that circumstance. It doesn't seem Formula One has that. The 2 seconds earlier it would have taken, they should have been noting that, I feel. Yeah. To not completely hang Lando out to dry. Yeah. They delayed it. Sometimes, as I said, sometimes they'll delay it, give everyone a chance to do what they're going to do, or sometimes they'll make sure they throw it to make sure that the leader isn't impacted negatively for something they didn't have anything to do with, really. Yeah, it is I'm sure it's a fine line, but I mean, you would like it to be where when safety cars are called out, they're done so in a way that doesn't penalize a leader. Right. But with all safety cars in F1, some win, some lose. It's always been that way. But anyway, he came out of the pits. Cold tires, that line out of the pit, still water on it. Obviously, there's no dry line there. So as he gave it some welly, his back end twitched out. It was a cool catch, though. It was a great catch. The fans at turn 2 sure had a field day right there. That was exciting. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And it's why the fans voted him driver of the race, and well deserved. I mean, he put on had a great job. Yeah. He had that brief scare into turn 2, lost his time that he had gained over Oscar and Lewis, lost a lot of that time, put Oscar right on his tail, then was able to pull back out. So he had that brief moment, but all in all, in balance, as I texted you, it's just been super fun watching the next generational battle between Max, George, Lando. Yeah, exactly. All of the next generation. They're all at the front, and there was Alonso and Hamilton watching from the back. Yeah, from behind them. Having their own great battle between them. No doubt. Yeah. But it was so cool to see all the young guns that all came up with each other in karting. Charles Leclerc and Carlos and all those guys. Yeah, they're all battling at the front now, and it's so much fun. And they're all good buddies. It's sort of different. The vibe between them is a little different than it was back in the day. They all seem to get along, off track anyway. Yeah. But so a great race from him. Oscar on the other side of the garage. He was running in P3. Then both Mercs balked for fresh tires. I suspected, we both did, we were texting, that may be a great move by Merc, and so it proved. They hunted down Oscar, passed him. He tried to hold off George, got very aggressive into that final chicane. Yeah, that was awesome. Which was a great move by him. But eventually the Mercs got around him, settled for P5. He wasn't happy with it, but I don't know that
he should be that hard on himself. You know, he was kind of a little bit of a sitting duck to the Mercs on fresh tires. At that point.
I mean,
but
you don't. You know, you're always going to be compared to your teammate, and obviously his teammate was maybe should have won the race, and
maybe Oscar should have been on the podium.
He wasn't quite there, but I did love that move into the chicane. That was elbows out. No, George, not today. And all these things have ramifications for future races. To know, you know, George. I mean, we've seen a lot of people give up that inside line going into the chicane, and Piastri was having nothing of it. But you know, 2-3 races down the road, 2-3 years down the road, George knows that Oscar is not going to be backing off, and if you're going to make it, you better get ahead before you turn that wheel into the corner.
Yeah, that's one side of Oscar he's not to be trifled with.
No, he's not. He's so quiet, but he is definitely one of those types.
Yeah, he is.
I love it.
For sure.
I like the way he
I do
drives.
too. I love it. Yeah, I like how Oscar drives. I'm really excited by him. He's doing really well. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton P4, George Russell in P3. George led for the first 20 laps, looked competitive, had pole position, looked competitive, led for first 20 laps, was totally in the mix. Unclear how strategy and tire wear would work for Mercedes. I wasn't quite sure on that front. I didn't pay as close attention on their long runs, and because they didn't really get a lot of long runs because the rain impacted FP1 and 2. So I wasn't quite sure. You could tell by Lewis on Friday, Mercedes' pace here at least is for real. I mean, they look real. My pick for podium was George in third, and I got it. But I think I wasn't as convinced on their long run pace. Should it be dry and what their tire wear was? Yeah. I think I was probably somewhat justified in that concern because I think Merck even knew it. They boxed for those fresh tires, which was the right move, which put the cat amongst the pigeons at that point. But George got passed by Max and Lando, had a couple unforced errors that he was not happy with himself, prompting Toto to come on and say, "Focus, George, focus." And it was interesting because on the Sky broadcast, I was a little surprised. Crofty said, is it just that George, when he's under pressure, he just makes too many errors? I thought, ooh. I've never heard him say that about Leclerc, and you could argue that Leclerc's had his fair share of unforced errors.
Definitely Leclerc has, I think, it's an opportunity loss for George. He knows it. Yeah. The fight with Piastri into that corner that he wasn't going to win, cost him a position on the exit.
2.
And a couple of other mistakes he made. I think overall out of the top 5 drivers, he lost the most time due to a mistake of his own doing. And you can't get that time back. It's judgment calls. Obviously, we don't get them all right all the time, but it was a bit of a rough race for him in that
respect.
Ragged. Because, and I don't know if it's exemplified before because they're finally competitive again, and he's trying to make it work. But he had the car under him to win the race. He absolutely did. And those errors put him out of contention to fight with Max and Lando, unfortunately for him.
And he had to kind of, you could almost see his redemption light bulb come on. Once he tried on Piastri, missed that, ran off, Lewis got around him. Then the redemption light bulb went off on him, and you could see it. And then he stormed back with passing Piastri first.
Right.
On the outside into the final chicane, and then put a wicked move on Lewis on the inside on that last chicane and moved up onto the podium. And at once, from the outside looking in, I say that's awesome because all of the hard work that Mercedes, the men and women Mercedes have done to get that car competitive and get on top of it is awesome payoff to get a podium, first pole position of the year, first podium of the year. They're moving the right direction. Time will tell. We don't know if this is going to be a long solution for them at all the remaining tracks. But, I was pretty happy for Mercedes and George at that point. Even Lewis looked super competitive. However, that isn't the way that he saw it.
And he shouldn't really.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're there to win. They're not podiums are great, and it's better than not being on the podium, but the wins are what they're going for. And I think it was a great turn for Mercedes. I mean, as desperate as everyone was at the beginning of the year, going, oh my God, it's just going to be a Red Bull yawn. I mean, McLaren coming on strong, great. Ferrari coming strong. Now add Mercedes to the mix.
Yeah.
This is going to be something.
It could be a banner year. Yeah, Lewis had a few mistakes early on, cost him some time, had that great battle with Fernando Alonso. But once he was on those hard tires late, the race really sort of came alive for him. Those hards once those hards came to life, he started to move up the field. He looked good for a podium when his teammate ran wide. Unfortunately for Lewis, he lost the spot to George, put a move on him down that final straight into the last chicane. Lewis, getting a little chippy over there. Comments. I gotta be honest with you. You know, he was here. I don't know this, but judging by what George said he did after Friday practice, looking at Lewis's data so he could understand, because Lewis was very fast on Friday.
Yeah.
George made those changes and took pole. I don't think Lewis is very happy about that, number one.
No.
And then number two, to get that move pulled on him and a couple, of his own mistakes during the race, Lewis is pretty hard. He said, he made mistakes. He got to get his head in the game. But he said he was really positive about the competitiveness of the car, and fair to him. So, yeah, a good battle with Fernando. He jumped Fernando, got that done. But, it's interesting.
He hung out with Fernando a little too long. He should.
Yeah.
He definitely should have done that. And, we know the situation. Lewis is leaving.
Sure.
Even if the team's asked him to team orders, I don't think anything would have happened,
Right.
between them. But, the team have the data, and they have the right to use it. And definitely Lewis has no right to veto any of that stuff. So he's going to have to kind of get used to it, really.
That's the way it's going to be.
It is going to put him at a bit of a deficit to George, honestly, as the season evolves.
It will.
But, in the big scheme of things, I think, Lewis is obviously an exceptional driver. He should still be fighting up there at the top. And he was just maybe just a little off of what George was capable of for whatever reason. It looked like the cars were different, their strengths. I think the Oscar and Norris, you'll say that their cars are kind of strong in the same points, but it didn't seem like they were a little different in their setup and where and how they were going to be fast. And in the end, Russell's was a bit more positive.
Yeah, agreed. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P7, Fernando Alonso, P6. Fernando had a good battle, like I mentioned, with Lewis. The old guard went at hammer and tongs back there. That was a lot of fun to watch. Lost out during the first safety car, though. Dropped back into P6, and from that point onward, completely lonely race. You didn't hear anything about Fernando. I don't know if he saw anybody back there. I don't know. He just ran home to P6. So not a lot to report about Fernando's race. Lance said it was one of the trickiest races he could recall. He said that he was very happy with his race. He stayed out of trouble, drove well, making a stop for the second set of enders, and then the hards at the right time. The team got the strategy spot on. Managed his wet weather tires. Was managing really those enters the first part of the stint because they were trying to run long to see if it was going to rain or not, and he did a really good job. And then, especially when the enters, as the track dried out, he had tires left, which was good.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is, I think this showed that the Astons have been dropping back recently, a little bit despair there, I think, with their pace, but I think they were right on it, and Lance backed that up with where Alonso was. So I think that was really positive for Lance, actually. He takes a bit of a beating and sometimes well earned, but in these conditions is a strong point for him, and Alonso is going to be strong no matter what the conditions are, really, as long as the car's underneath him. So I think for Lance to be on the tail of Fernando is a great option there.
Did you see Alonso's car control when he was battling Lewis in that wet?
Oh yeah,
that car was all over the place. Snap, oversteer, understeer. Alonso, it was just going crazy.
But you know what? I think sometimes he does that to put the car off behind.
He might.
It's a It's probably not used by too many, but it is a strategy where if you can look like you are just driving on the edge and you're about to crash, it makes people check up a little bit, and I could see Alonso using that as he's got a lot of tools in his chest.
Yeah,
that might also be one of them too.
I wouldn't put anything past him.
No, I wouldn't.
And it's good to see because we've talked about Lance before. He actually does pretty well in changing conditions.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that's where he's had his best races, really.
Yeah, he really has.
Yeah.
Team RB, Daniel Ricciardo P8, Yuki Tsunoda P14. Dan got a 5-second penalty for a false start. He served that during his first stop. And to be fair, I didn't. He didn't get the best of starts. Period.
Right.
Drifted backwards early on. Once the track dried and he was on mediums, though, he was able to really start to show that RB's pace. And both of them looked quick all weekend, to be honest with you. He started picking his way back up through the field, got up to P8, good points, and it ought to make Jacques Villeneuve happy.
Yeah, yeah, Jacques was all over him. But and Jacques was long in the tooth in Formula One there.
Yes.
So it's pretty funny for him to say that stuff because I think Jacques was toast about 2 years before he actually got the boot in Formula One.
Yeah, I was saying that he didn't follow that it's better to burn out than to fade away. I think Jacques, his career waned and we all, bore the brunt of that as he stayed in the series.
Yeah. Now, Ricciardo, I think, he got shuffled back a little bit in those first couple laps, but I think it's about that he needs that result. And so he's not going to drive with reckless abandon for the next person in front. He's just trying to survive because he has a car that can do well in the race. Yeah. Survive those first 2 laps, don't get involved in an incident, and then hopefully, get some points. And I think, that ideology does make you more susceptible for losing positions at the start of the race. Yeah.
He just wanted to keep out of trouble, stay in the race, and see what they could achieve through strategy.
Right, yeah.
Yuki chose to stay out during the safety car for track position. He was running well into the points. He was running 7th until Stroll got around him. And then when Dan recovered, Dan came up behind him, had a little pressure on him, and he spun.
Yeah.
And out of the points, drifted the back. Yuki said it was totally his mistake. It was a stupid move, he said. And he apologized to the team. So tough race for the Yukester.
Yeah, he was doing well on those long, as I said, very long in the tooth inters. He was actually holding the pace pretty well, but ultimately the pressure, he had a lot of cars steamrolling behind him, and he just lost it.
But he got a new contract.
Yep, and people are just, it's like he's the second coming right now.
I know.
Somehow.
I know.
But, he's better than he was, but I'm not sure he's as good as
It's kind of how I read it, too. I was like, he's the driver of the year. So I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
He's improved, and that's awesome. I'm excited.
Yes, his attitude's improved, at least outwardly.
Outwardly, yeah. I'm excited for him, but, I don't know. What we need to start building statues.
Yeah, I still want to see Liam Lawson get another go.
Me
before
too.
This year is out, because as one of the interviews I saw with him, he's like, that all they have to do compare is to what I did last year.
Yeah.
So I think we need to see what Liam's capable of.
Yeah, me too.
Somehow. Yeah.
My hunch is you put Liam in Dan's car. I could be wrong, and for Yuki's sake, I hope I am. But I think that may expose the reality.
Yeah. Right, which is what we saw last year, right?
It is what we saw.
And now Liam's actually got more experience to draw from. I think he would even be better.
Yeah, I do too. Alpine, Pierre Gasly, P9, Esteban Ocon, P10. More fireworks over at Alpine this weekend. Esteban stayed out during the safety car for track position, running in the points. But when Gasly turned up the wick and recovered from being pummeled by Sergio at the start, he really started to come up through the order. And so when he got when he got up there, he had serious pace, but come to find out, Esteban was struggling with a power unit issue. And so as Gasly came up behind him, the team reversed the order to allow Gasly to go through it. First, Esteban didn't want to, but the team was insistent. So Esteban let Pierre go by and then said, okay, all right, fine, I let him by, but do the right thing and then reverse it. If he doesn't get Dan and isn't able to pass Dan, well, the problem with that is they reversed it and let Pierre ahead with 2 laps to go. And Esteban was nursing an engine issue. And so even though Pierre wasn't able to get by Dan, he couldn't make ground on Dan.
Yeah.
Esteban asked to reverse back the order. But the problem by then, Paul, was that Hülkenberg was all over the back of Esteban. So for them to try to reverse thing, Hülkenberg could have passed both of them.
Yeah, it'd be a nightmare, right? Some 2 cars scoring points to 0 points. Yeah.
Right.
Team did the right decision, and it's not the driver is not the defining decision maker. You know, the drivers are driving for the team, and you do everything you can to help the driver and keep them positive and keep them at their best. But in the end, constructors' points are massive in Formula One, and the team has to do everything it can to get them because not every week they're available, right?
Especially if you're an Alpine, yes.
Yeah, especially if you're an Alpine.
Pierre got clubbed by Sergio at the start, had some damage. He really came alive, though, on that last set of tires, clawed his way back up to 10th. Then Yuki spun, inherited 9th. Once Esteban moved out of the way, he moved up and was trying to go have a run for Dan. Couldn't get around Dan, but it was a dual points finish for the team. Arguably, yes, dual points, but there was a lot of attrition ahead of him. So, take that for what it's worth.
Ferrari.
Yeah. Threw up in my mouth a little bit there. Okay, where are we at? Haas. Nico Hülkenberg, P11, Kevin Magnussen, P12. Haas pulled a gamble at the start, put on full wet tires while everyone else was on inters, and it worked a treat, Paul.
Yeah, it did.
Kevin Magnussen went from 14th to 4th in a lap or two. They were just scything through the field. Both of them went all the way up, and it was great fun. They were setting laps that were 1 to 2 seconds quicker than all the enters around it.
It was hilarious.
A lot of fun to watch. Both Haas's just passing everybody. It was wonderful. There was no doubt, though, that there was going to be a crossover period when the wets became ineffective and the enters really came on song. And you and I were texting, and you were like, boom. Wets are dead, and you were like, okay, so they should dive in now, and they were a little later than when you called it, unfortunately. And then when they did box, Kevin, unfortunately, it was a long stop. They weren't ready for it.
That was brutal.
So all that gain,
how does that happen?
Gambling, go up to 4th, box for enters. You're going to drop down to hopefully 10th or something, and maybe gain some track position, but that killed it.
Big mistake by the team not being ready.
Yeah.
They actually made 2 really big errors. The pit stop was one. The second one was pitting for the new inters, the second set of inters.
Yeah.
When, we saw Yuki stay out.
Yep.
But actually, the Haas guys had the newest set of inters out there. If there was anyone that should have stayed out and not pitted during the other yellow, it should have been them and get that track position back. And they didn't. They pitted and they kind of followed where everyone else went. And I mean, they were only 11th, 12th in the race. I think easily they could have scored points without those 2 errors.
Yeah. And Nico, he stayed out ultimately. That paid the price because he was out on the wets. He went
but don't you think he was he was actually helping Kevin at that point?
I think.
I think the good thing is these guys work together, and so I think he was holding up the whole field so that Kevin could make up all that gap he lost in that crappy pit stop. But
I kind of feel like that's what they're doing. Then they tried putting Kevin on softs well ahead of everyone else. That didn't really work out. It's a shame because I think you're right, Paul. I think they had the fresher enters, and had they gone long, that may have paid dividends and got them into the points.
I really think it would have,
Yeah, it's a good point. But anyway, It was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Kick Sauber in the nuts? No. Kick Sauber in the shin. There you go. Valtteri Bottas. Bottas. P13. Joe going to you for P15. Not a lot to talk about here. Very familiar territory where they finished for Sauber, even though they started both cars in the pit lane. They said, look, qualifying didn't really go that well. We're going to change our car for a wet setup. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did. They started from the pit lane. Unfortunately, the wet setup didn't really work that well
still
either.
Slow.
It didn't pay any dividends. Bottas was one of the first to change the slicks, got hit by Carlos Sainz. That was a recurring theme for this race. Mm-hmm. And Joe said he didn't feel too confident in the car. It's a very lonely race for him, very challenging weekend for the team.
Joe had a terrible weekend altogether.
He did have a bad weekend. Yeah. Valtteri spun. Bad weekend for Kick Sauber. Kick Sauber while they're down.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about Williams. You had Alex Albon, a nice DNF, and Logan Sargent, a nice DNF. Logan ran wide first, backed up, got back on. Then he spun, got turned around, got back on the car. Then he hit the wall. So try until you crash.
Finally,
and that's what he did. I got to be honest with you. I don't know if he's going to see the end of this season.
I don't see it. I think we're going to make it to the break, and maybe Liam Lawson can find a spot there in the interim or something. But Williams, they're doing a pretty good job with their car. It can score points, obviously in the hands of Albon, but they need a better second driver. And I don't know what Sargent's bringing to the team, but it's not enough. Right? Yeah, he's bringing money, but when he's crashing and costing the team points every weekend, there's no way he's got that much money coming up behind him. So if I was Williams and I was Val's, I would be like absolutely trying to figure out a way of, reversing the commitment for Sargent for the year and move on.
Yeah, because if you look at Alex in this race, he had good points run going. Felt like he was heading towards the top 10 finish until Carlos passed him, then spun in front of him and knocked Alex out of the race. And nothing to do with Alex. Right. It's a shame because he had a terrific two-car pass that I thought was awesome against Ricciardo and Ocon. Was looking very good all day. I think to your point, Paul, and I think James Vowles released a video that I saw earlier this morning later that day. But and James said, there's some things to take away from this. We're very positive about the upgrades that we brought. Mm-hmm. And the car was fast in Monaco, and it was fast here in Canada, two radically different circuits. So we take the positives from that. Yeah. And I think you're right, Paul. I think the team are making good progress now. I know they had the hiccup. They didn't have any spare parts for 2 or 3 races but that was kind of a Logan Sargent situation where he had to take the damaged chassis from Alex and that whole thing, that was weird. Yeah. But the upgrades do seem to work, and I think Alex would prove it given where he was running before Carlos hit him. But to your point, there's a lot left on the table with Logan.
Yeah.
Then finally we get down to Ferrari. This hurts.
This is painful.
My fantasy GP team, I'm doing so bad this year. I had Max.
You were doing well though for a while when Ferrari were on a rise.
I know, and I had Max. My podium this weekend, I had Max, Piastri, and George. I was just off by one McLaren, but my teams. Ferrari, miserable. Charles Leclerc, DNF, Carlos Sainz, DNF. Miserable weekend for Ferrari. They went from hero in Monaco to 0 in Canada, starting well back in the field during qualifying. Charles had an engine issue costing him a second or more down the straights. The team put on the hards. He did a reset of the engine. That fixed the engine, but it was a very slow stop. Then they boxed again for inters. That put him a lap down. At that point, they said, oh, hell, let's not put the mileage on the engine. They boxed him. They parked up the car. Game over for him. Carlos was ping-ponging off a few cars. He hit Bottas to begin with. Then he damaged his front wing, and then he spun. After passing Albon, he spun in front of Albon and took Albon out. It was a galactic failure on Ferrari's part.
The whole team.
Yeah, the whole team. They never looked on song all weekend long. It's such a shame. Because coming out of Monaco, you're thinking, whoa, Ferrari's in it. Ferrari is in it, and they're only 24 points behind Red Bull in the constructors. This is awesome. Boom. Explosion.
I don't know what the hell happened to them this weekend, honestly.
I don't know.
Hopefully they can figure out what happened to them and fix it, but it was disastrous. Disastrous the whole weekend. Pace, obviously the technical issue with Leclerc, and then, the driving mistake by Sainz. I mean, the whole team is responsible for a really crappy weekend, and they can't have too many of these.
Yeah.
McLaren and Mercedes are pretty strong. I don't think it's gonna be like this. There's something weird that happened this weekend. I'm not sure what with the car or what was happening, but something very strange, and hopefully they can rectify it for the next race. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I went all in on Ferrari. And
yeah. Well, I've had Ferrari on my team till this weekend. I dropped them and
wisely.
Yeah, I wisely dropped them. I had Mercedes and McLaren as my constructors. So it worked out pretty well for me.
Approval. Yeah.
Up to P6.
Yay.
Yeah.
You're killing it over there.
Killing it.
Yeah, I sank like a stone.
You did.
I sank like loose change in a couch cushion. It was terrible. I think I'm down to 20th. It's just miserable.
I think you were ahead of me last week, so that's the crazy thing.
I know. Yeah, it's terrible. Just terrible.
With your life and how Ferrari goes, doth you go.
I know. You and Ferrari, I won. You and Lando won.
I fall with the prancing horse.
Yes, I know. I live and die with the prancing horse. Oh, and not even Italian.
Yeah.
No part of me.
Yeah.
I know. Let's do some awards, shall we? First award is Move of the Race.
Seriously, Todd?
Yes. Seriously. Who'd you have Move of the Race, Paul?
Oh, there was a few. There was quite a few, actually. So I'm going to go with the Albon move, where he passed Ricciardo and Ocon into the same corner. That was
great move.
Opportunist, and he
talk about thread the needle.
Yeah, talk about that. It was like, I'll pass Ricciardo. Oh, wait, hey, there's opportunity here.
Ocon.
Stick my nose in. Only Ocon. Yeah,
it was great move. I had that one down too, just to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to go George on Lewis.
Okay.
It was sort of new generation, kicking the old generation in the backside there a little.
Not easy for Lewis to take right now.
No, it's not. And it's pretty ballsy of George because it's wet out there.
Yeah.
And you see him catch that up when he went out on the inside. Boy, he had to catch that. Then he made it through the chicane, coming to the wall, had to catch it again at the wall. It was a ballsy move. Focus, George. Focus.
Focus.
So that's who I gave it to. Yes.
Get down.
All right. Next award is Donkey the Race.
We'll do it live.
All right. Paul, who'd you get?
It's all colored red, my friend. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
When
they said paint the town red, they didn't mean
I know.
that.
It was so bad. It's so bad.
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
Yes. Yeah, I do. That's who I had, Ferrari. And then finally, Drive of the Race.
Get down. Get down.
Yes, Paul. Drive of the Race. Who'd you have?
It's a close thing. There was some good drives. There was a lot of mistakes, but I'm going to say I'm going to give it to Norris because I think it was
well
his.
Deserved.
A safety car reversed. I think he actually had the pace to beat everybody today. and he didn't quite get there, but I think he drove an impressive race the whole time.
He drove a great race.
Yeah.
Those laps he put in while he stayed out.
Yeah. That's qualifying laps right there, yeah.
He
had a couple of moments, obviously when the surface was a little mixed also at the beginning of the race where he started to make up all those seconds.
I know.
A couple of moments you just saw, he had the bit between his teeth.
Yeah, man, he was on it. Just to mix it up a little bit, I'm going to give it to Max.
Okay.
I know it's popular and fun to beat up on Max lately, but I think he drove an amazing race this weekend. Wasn't the fastest car on the grid. Driving around, he adapted, overcame the issues of that car to drive around the issues of that car, and then grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and hauled that thing up for a win, and won by just over 3 seconds. So that was a champion's drive. That's what champions do. And I've seen that from champions in the past, and I just thought it was a great race for him. A fantastic performance.
It was, yeah.
That's
Can't
my
take
choice.
it away from
All
him
right.
just because he's been dominant, It was a great drive,
Yeah. Well, Paul, I'm wishing you all the best in the 24 hours of law. You know what they say? It always rains at Le Mans.
Yeah, and it's looking likely, right? So it's not supposed to rain like super heavy, like one of those night-long things, but it looks like it's definitely going to be a bit of precipitation, let's call it, through the weekend. Yeah.
Well, the good news is at Le Mans, the nights are short, unlike Daytona 24.
Right.
Where the nights are long and cold.
So long. So
long. And you stood at the very top of Daytona up there with blood freezing doing spotting.
Yeah.
All night.
It's nearly the coldest times ever in my life has been at Daytona, as crazy as that sounds.
No.
My legs are shaking. I'm just, where's my peanut butter and jelly sandwich and my hot soup?
Yeah. But do me a favor when you're over there. I know it's France, but at least find a good Belgian beer and have one.
Oh, yes. Okay. Will do.
Yeah. Find a good one. All right. Well, that's what we think of the race, the Canadian Grand Prix. Let us know what you think. You can do so by going to theparkforme.com. Share your opinion. Just do it to Corman Civility. As always, a huge, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. We would not do this podcast without you. And it is a true honor to have your support. And we really, really do appreciate it. If you like this podcast, share it with a friend. Give us a good rating on your favorite podcast player. As always, you can watch this podcast on our YouTube channel. Links in the post for this podcast at our website. And you can watch if you want to see Talking Heads. And until next week, when we come back to do it all over again, and we're going to get an exciting race. I'm going to tell you.
Oh, yeah. She loves Canada, too. Yes.
She loves Canada. She's been to Canada. And she's going to be pretty darned excited about this race, as she should be. I, too, even a Ferrari fan, I am super excited for McLaren. So happy for him. So, all right, Paul, best of luck. And we're going to see you back for the Spanish Grand Prix review. And until we come back and do that all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.